Many women think that if they find a lump in their breast, it automatically means surgically removing the affected breast. In fact, the majority of operations done nowadays are lumpectomies, where only the malignant lump is removed and followed by a course of radiotherapy. Fortunately, the death rate from breast cancer is falling in this country for the first time. But I would much rather we could avoid having to treat it in the first place by preventing breast cancer altogether.
If you want to know more about breast cancer, then call the Your Shout helpline now.
If you have something to shout about, call the Your Shout information line on 0870 600 7280 or send us an email.
A test of loyalty.
I think she's going to make a complete recovery.
Bitter recrimination.
This calls for a celebration Monday.
Murderous intent.
We've got to stop her talking to the police.
Emmerdale.
Tonight is definitely the night.
A 1 hour special.
Please help me, kid.
Tuesday at 7 on ITV.
You're watching Carlton. Now a look at the news in London today with Angus Scott and Kate Harding.
Hello, good afternoon. The top story in London today: fury unleashed against police over deaths in custody. The families of Londoners who've died while being held by the Met claim they've been silenced. Today they're protesting as police address the problem at a conference.
We should have been the first choice in that conference today. We shouldn't have to beg and demand to be heard. We will not be forgotten.
In half an hour, the families of those who've died speak of how they believe police can cut the number of deaths in custody. But now it's over to Kate Harding for today's other headline news. Kate.
A woman was kidnapped from an East London street by a gang and subjected to an 18-hour sex attack, it was revealed today. The 29-year-old victim was bundled into the back of a car by 3 men in Laybridge Road, Leighton. The woman managed to escape when the vehicle slowed down. The car is believed to be a battered mustard-coloured Ford Sierra. Trains on one of the capital's main commuter lines were halted this morning after a fire near a railway line in south-east London. Up to 30 firefighters were called to the blaze under some arches near Rotherhithe. The track between London Bridge and South Bermondsey is expected to be reopened later this afternoon.
It should have been the height of the rush hour. Instead, the platform at South Bermondsey station was empty and the trains were going nowhere. A fire in a car breaker's yard beneath a railway viaduct had forced Railtrack to switch off the power to the line. The blaze was out fairly quickly, but fire officers became concerned when they discovered acetylene gas cylinders stored in the arch.
At the moment they're being called down. What we do then is we've got specialist equipment called thermal image cameras where they can see if there's any hot spots on the cylinders. Now once they've found out that the cylinders are properly cooled, you can then immerse them in water.
Only when the threat of explosion is gone will services restart. The shutdown at 5:30 this morning has forced the cancellation of 8 trains an hour on the busy South London loop between London Bridge and Victoria stations. Passengers were ferried to their destination by bus.
I think it's absolutely awful. I didn't expect us to get into work.
I'm quite angry with it because I'm going to be late now.
Well, it's pain, but there's nothing I can do about it, really.
While delays are still occurring, the fire brigade is expected to give the all clear in the next few hours. Conic South Central say they expect services to have returned to normal in time for this evening's rush hour. At London Bridge, this is Rebecca Smith for London Today.
A teenager is due to appear before Camberwell magistrates today, charged with the murder of a young mother from South London. Avril Johnson was bound and shot in front of her 2 children at her home in Brixton in June. Her husband, Kirk, was also attacked and suffered stab wounds. Raymond Johnson, who's 19, also faces charges of attempted murder and rape. Capital Radio celebrates 25 years on London's airwaves today. The pioneering independent station was launched in Euston Road a quarter of a century ago. DJs, past and present, will be at a special birthday party. Among them, veteran Dave Cash, who was one of the Capital's founding presenters. The station has since moved from its Euston home to Leicester Square. The Millennium Dome in South London went online today. Internet users from around the world can now see Britain how it's planning to celebrate the year 2000 by visiting a virtual dome.
Computers helped design it, now computers are bringing the dome to our homes. If you're on the internet, you can take a virtual journey to the East Greenwich Peninsula. Yet another device designed to whet our appetites for the real thing.
The great power of virtual realities of this kind is that people can experience through their own PCs, through the internet, in their own homes, what others will experience in practice.
But the dome's secrets will remain. You can walk round it using your computer, you can fly over it, you can experience the virtual crowds which will flock to see it. But its contents will still be a mystery.
They won't see inside it yet, but that will come. Once you've experienced the Millennium Dome in the form of virtual reality, people will want to go and see it and taste it and experience and have fun in it for themselves.
Over the next year, the Dome website will be updated to give us an idea of what to expect from the Millennium Experience. And if we like what we see, we'll be able to buy tickets on the internet too. This is Paul Larsman for London Today.
Kew Gardens celebrates the 150th anniversary of its world-famous palm house this weekend. It was regarded as a feat of engineering when it opened in 1848.
It's 150 years old this week, but it's as impressive as ever, the palm house at Kew Gardens. Constructed in 1848, a wonder of the age, refurbished 100 years later and reopened by the Queen. Now staff at Kew are paying tribute to their antique glass house with a weekend of Victorian celebrations, which includes dressing up in costume. For them, the excitement hasn't faded in a century and a half.
Wow, must have been their first impression. And then walking into this sort of humid tropical rainforest must have been another wow. So it is a very wow building. And once they were inside, they saw some, treasures from tropical rainforest that they'd never seen before. Plants come back to Kew, we look at them, research them, and if they are very endangered, like the Ramusmania from the island of Rodrigues, we propagate them and eventually we'll send some material back out to the country. Cocos nucifera, the coconut tree, very, very important to man, 101 uses. The trunk used for timber, the leaves for thatching, for hats, and probably the most important for us here at Kew is the coir, the outer part of the coconut, we use instead of peat. The only thing which I'm restricted in is in the height of the house. As you can see behind us, some of the things right up towards the top of the glass, and there's only 19 metres here, where some of the trees in the rainforest are vast.
It makes you realise that growing plants isn't just about soil and rainfall. At Kew, it's all about enthusiasm. And they inherited that directly from the Victorian visionaries who built the palm house. At Kew, this is Damon Green for London Today.
Sport and the World Heavyweight Championship fight between Evander Holyfield and London's Lennox Lewis moved a step closer today. Holyfield signed contracts for the match late last night. It's estimated he will earn £12 million, while Lewis will receive $5 million. The gambling city of Las Vegas is expected to host the unification clash early next year. Lewis is now thought to be ready to sign. That's the news so far today. Back to Angus.
Kate, thank you very much indeed. Coming up in the main edition of London Today in half an hour, hunting the sadistic animal killers. Cat owners in North London are told to keep their pets inside following a string of decapitations. Plus, the new Wonder Bra girl tells me why she's giving her support to a charity sell-off of celebrities' designs. And the woman who thinks her semi looks pretty in pink makes her council see red. All that and more in London Today in half an hour after the national news from ITN. Do join me then if you can, but for now, bye-bye.
Carlton Weather, sponsored by Sea France, Dover-Calais Ferries.
Hello, good afternoon. There's a beautiful red sky this morning. For once, a shepherd's warning would have been in order. There's wet and windy weather on the way. Already it's looking a lot greyer out there. On the satellite picture, you can see the clouds piling in from the north and west. The wet and windy weather arriving here in the southeast this evening, I think, and overnight. Up until then, just one or two spots of rain around. So for the rest of the afternoon, it is generally cloudy now. Patchy rain coming down later this afternoon, the more general rain holding off until this evening. And the wind's freshening up too, quite a strong southwest wind, I think, by the end of the afternoon. And then tonight, wet and windy weather in from the north and west, sweeping away very quickly down to the south and east by the end of the night. So clear spells to end the night. Temperatures probably down to around 9 at very lowest. That's around 48. A showery day tomorrow. Here's a summary.
For a more detailed 5-day outlook, call Weather Update, sponsored by Sea France.
The Jerry Springer Show's in an hour, and today Jerry will be seeing what life is like for women in jail and meeting the first women's chain gang. That's at 1:30 here on Carlton.
From the studios of ITN, the news with Dermot Murnahan and Julia Somerville.
Good afternoon, welcome to the programme.
Hello, in this Friday's Lunchtime News, John Hume and David Trimble share the Nobel Peace Prize, why the committee honoured the men behind the Ulster peace deal. The weather forecast for the next century, predictions that global warming will alter our climate dramatically. And a supermarket chain bans foreign lamb. Farmers are delighted, but what does it mean for consumers?
This year's Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to the SDLP leader John Hume and Northern Ireland's First Minister David Trimble for their role in the peace process. They're recognised for overcoming their rivalry to work towards an end to 30 years of sectarian violence.
Both men say they're honoured by the award, but have made it clear they're not the only ones who deserve it. In the words of the Northern Ireland Secretary Mo Mowlam, the people of Ulster should take great pride in the achievement. John Irvine reports.
The Nobel Committee was expected to reward some of Northern Ireland's peacemakers. The question was who, and the verdict was that the leaders of the two main political parties here were the most deserving.
John Hume or David Trimble.
The committee praised both men individually and said it hoped they would inspire others around the world.
That is a very important point to the committee, that this should serve as an example also for other conflicts. The resolution of other conflicts.
John Hume was in his home city of Derry when the news came through. The Nobel Committee described Mr. Hume as the clearest and most consistent of Northern Ireland's leaders in his work for a political solution.
Well, as you would expect, I'm very deeply honoured to have received this award today. But I see it not as an award to myself, but as a very powerful international approval of the peace process in Northern Ireland.
The Ulster Unionist leader and First Minister David Trimble is in the United States. The Nobel Committee said he had shown great political courage when, at a critical stage in the process, he advocated solutions which led to the peace agreement. Earlier this year, as the peace talks at Stormont entered their final phase, the relationship between Mr. Trimble and Mr. Hume was pivotal. The leaders of the two largest parties became an effective double act. Now their work together has earned them one of the world's most prestigious accolades.
I think it has gone to those who deserve it most, the party leaders locally. It's their courage, their determination that takes the peace process forward. They have to do it, and I'm pleased that it is to John and David.
This is a boost for the Northern Ireland peace process in general and for David Trimble in particular, for he is under real pressure from rebels inside his own party, and they would perhaps seem rather churlish to try to continue to undermine a winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. John Irvine, ITN, Belfast.
John Hume and David Trimble came to their roles as peacemakers through very different routes. So what kind of journeys led both men to the same reward? Terry Lloyd has been looking at their careers.
Once they were deeply divided, separated by politics and bitterness. But John Hume and David Trimble came together at a pop concert given by the band U2. In his spare time, Ulster's First Minister listens to Wagner and Strauss, but in public he's seen as a hardliner and confrontational MP. Together with the Reverend Ian Paisley, he led Orangemen through the disputed town of Drumcree, fueling the hatred felt by nationalist families. Yet David Trimble had the vision to drag Ulster unionism into the 21st century, and 3 years ago he travelled to Dublin for talks with the then Prime Minister, John Bruton. Perhaps his grandest gesture was to sit down and talk with one-time bitter enemies inside Sinn Féin. It brought about peace, but left him with a party rife with unease and mistrust. For John Hume, the ultimate prize will be a lasting peace. He once trained for the priesthood and became a teacher. but for the last 30 years he's devoted his life to bringing Ulster together. The SDLP leader arranged secret talks with Sinn Féin in the mid-1980s, risking the wrath of many of his constituents and friends. Yet the continued dialogue was to bring Gerry Adams to the negotiating table, creating the present Peace Pact. His peacemaking has been widely acknowledged not just today. Earlier this week, the gentleman of Ulster politics was awarded the Sean McBride Prize from the International Peace Bureau. Terry Lloyd, ITN.
Well, with me now is the journalist Ruth Dudley-Edwards, who knows both Mr Trimble and Mr Hume very well. Ruth Dudley-Edwards, do you think this will bolster the peace process with this potentially tricky period pretty close ahead?
I think it's tremendously important, because what has happened is that constitutional politicians have been backed here. I mean, there was a frightful rumour that Gerry Adams might be included in the award, and that would have been very unfortunate, because what's happening in Northern Ireland really is that the Democrats are taking control, and it's very important that they should be backed. And that's what's happened. John Hume and David Trimble have led these major parties who have never, ever given in to the temptation to seek a way through with violence.
Now it's David Trimble whose position is being seen as most fragile. Will this have an effect on his critics?
I don't know that it'll help so much with his critics within his own party. That's the problem. There is a certain suspicion within the Ulster Protestant community about do-gooders from outside, meddling as they would see it. I hope it will bolster him in the peace process generally, in that it'll be much harder for Sinn Féin, for instance, to say that he's anti-peace. I mean, at the moment he is having to take a strong line on the decommissioning of terrorist weapons and so on, and I think it'll strengthen him there, because it is seen that he is internationally recognised as somebody who's taken enormous risks for peace.
And what about the people left out? Do you think the committee have spread the net widely enough? One thinks of Mo Molan, Senator George Mitchell, the two Prime Ministers.
One also thinks of Seamus Mallon, who is the Deputy First Minister designate in Northern Ireland, and who has been a huge and powerful influence during the talks and mustn't be diminished. George Mitchell, yes, I would say he certainly deserves a lot of credit. 2 years stuck in Belfast, with people fighting. I mean, I think he's been absolutely remarkable.
And of course there were the original architects, John Major and Albert Reynolds.
Absolutely, but I think one gets into terribly disputed areas. Once you start giving it to 4 or 5, then what about the 6th and 7th? I think they took the wise and right decision, and, you know, I think we can all celebrate it.
Ruth Dudley-Edwards, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The Bank of England is under renewed pressure to follow America's lead and announce a further cut in interest rates. The surprise cut of 0.25% by the US Federal Reserve sent shares there soaring, and shares here have followed suit, rising strongly this morning. Now there are calls for the Bank of England not to wait until next month before deciding on another rate cut. Lauren Taylor reports.
The unexpected move of a second interest rate cut in 2 weeks in America has immediately brought calls for the Monetary Policy Committee here at the Bank of England to follow suit, with some economists and manufacturers saying a 0.5% drop is now necessary. In the dealing rooms, the American rate cut has been widely welcomed, with shares shooting up as soon as the stock market opened in London. The pattern has been similar around the world. The cut has been seen as a sign that the problems in the American economy are being taken seriously, and analysts say the markets expect further rate cuts to follow in Europe.
What they're looking at is saying, OK, the policymakers are going to do something about it now. It will mean more rate cuts on the way, and that will be good for companies, good for economies, and so good for asset markets.
The next meeting on interest rates at the Bank of England is not due until next month, but if the bank decides to act sooner, it can hold an emergency session. One manufacturing union has already called for that to happen. Many in industry were unhappy with the last cut of 0.25%. Today, business leaders also urged the Monetary Policy Committee, or MPC, to act quickly.
If the MPC doesn't cut rates, then we're going to see further slides in consumer confidence, weaker consumer spending, weaker business investments, and obviously that weakens the overall economy.
With the recent news that in Britain job losses are beginning to spread from manufacturing to the service industries and America's latest rate cut, the pressure is likely to continue to grow for a similar drop in interest rates here until the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee meets again. Lauren Taylor, ITN, at the Bank of England.
The prosecution case is entering its final stage in the trial of the man accused of bludgeoning to death Lynn and Megan Russell in Kent. Michael Stone denies murdering the mother and daughter and attempting to murder Megan's older sister Josie. Adrian Britton reports from Maidstone Crown Court.
Anne Rafferty QC for the prosecution has begun the final day of the Crown's case against Michael Stone. she read out a new statement from a witness who wanted to add to evidence she gave at the start of this trial. Pauline Wilkerson originally said she saw a man driving an off-white Ford Escort near Chillenden in Kent shortly before the time of the murders. But when she saw this picture of Michael Stone in a newspaper 8 days ago, she contacted police again to say she was almost certain this was the man she saw driving the car. Detective Sergeant Richard Bowler, on the left, is one of the officers who interviewed Stone after he was arrested last year. He told the court that when he revealed to the suspect that a DNA profile of his hair was almost identical to hair found at the scene, Stone replied, "I'm in deep trouble by the sound of it, but I didn't kill her." When Stone was asked by police where he was on the 9th of July, DS Bowler says he replied, "I can't remember for two reasons. One, I was so badly on drugs. Two, it was such a long time ago." This trial has heard that Michael Stone, who denies the charges, was seen wearing blood-stained clothing the morning after the Chillenden murders. The police say he told them he'd got rid of all the clothes he wore in the summer of '96 because they no longer fitted him. He'd put on weight. Adrian Britton, ITN, at Maidstone Crown Court.
We're going to take a break now.
Still to come on the Lunchtime News, Wither the Weather. New research out this morning warns of a tempestuous climate for future generations. We'll have the details.
And Rule Britannia will be reporting from inside the royal yacht before she makes her debut as a tourist attraction.
That's in a couple of minutes. Join us then.
There's 53 Rosalie Avenue, Daventry, Hilltop, Hill Rise, Mill Green, Aberdeen, Dunromin, Home Sweet Home in Broadstairs, Smallstairs, Fletchers in Aberdare, Treetop, Seaview, Shaynoo, 22 Mews in Catford, Bungalows in Walthamstow.
Do you have a nice view? Lettsby Avenue, number 8, Harrogate, Patio Garden Gate, Thatch near Hatch End, Cul-de-sac and Crouch End, Timber Frame, Window Frame,
Dunromin again,
2 up,
2 down,
anywhere, anytown, semis in suburbia, couldn't be superbia. Front door, back door, black door, greenhouse, new house, happy home in High Street, my street,
another Dunromin.
Whoever you are, whenever you want to buy a home, it pays to decide nationwide.
This is the stylish Hotpoint Ultima. And this is Persil Performance, designed to work with Hotpoint's bioprofile system. It helps stop the colours running into your whites. You won't be the only one to notice the difference. Persil Performance and Hotpoint, altogether brilliant.
Time is the new name in computer retailing.
At Time, we're committed to making computer buying easy.
It's time for our sales staff to take the time
to understand your specific needs.
It's time for plain English,
not technical jargon.
It's time for computers that grow with you
and are easily updated.
It's Time who cut out the middleman
and cut the cost of computers.
So if you're looking for a computer, isn't it time you talk to us?
Time Computer Systems, we're on your side.
There's a new soup from Campbell's that's sealed in a carton. To capture the deliciously fresh flavour. It's causing a stir. And people want a taste. New Campbell's deliciously good soups.
In all things electrical, there's negative and positive. Negative. Positive. So if you need the lowest price guaranteed, come to Comet. With Positive, we can help.
Welcome back. You're watching the Lunchtime News, and first the weather forecast for the next 100 years.
Yes, it's going to be hotter, and that's official. Government weather experts are warning of a rise in the average temperature of 3 degrees over the next century, and that'll mean a dramatic change in Britain's weather patterns. It may not sound like much, but a rise of just 5 degrees brought us out of the last ice age. Tim Wilcox reports.
The floodwaters that washed over the Midlands earlier this year devastated whole towns and communities. The clean-up bill ran into millions. But far from being a once-in-a-lifetime experience, these climatic catastrophes could by the year 3000 be happening every decade. Scientists predict that in just 100 years, global warming will lead to weather extremes of almost biblical proportions, and the temperature increase will hit Britain just as hard as the rest of the world. It'll mean that the northwest of the country will be much wetter and generally stormy, and generally more at risk from flooding. The southeast of Britain will become more dry and arid, with temperatures regularly above 25 centigrade and more frequent droughts.
We expect there to be an increase in temperature of 3 degrees Celsius worldwide, which may not sound much, but when I say that in the last ice age the temperature only fell 5 degrees, one can see that there will be enormous impacts.
Future soaring temperatures here linked to an international problem.
It's certainly true that it's a global problem. The greenhouse gas emissions mix completely in the atmosphere, so there's no such thing as a local climate change. It will be global. So indeed, it does depend on global action if we do feel that we need to take a hefty reduction in greenhouse gas emissions.
New sea defences and flood barriers will have to be built or expanded as the country and the world comes to terms with the bill for the squandering and destruction of the atmosphere of previous generations. Tim Wilcox, ITN.
A defrocked clergyman is mounting a legal challenge today over the legality of the church court which found him guilty of adultery with a parishioner. Clifford Williams was sacked as rector of Ben Lech on the island of Anglesey after the court said he'd given cause for scandal or offence. Ben McCarthy reports.
Clifford Williams came to the High Court this morning to challenge the decision of the ancient Welsh Church Court which found him guilty of adultery and banned him from practising as a priest. He claims he's innocent and his trial was unfair.
It's been a miscarriage of justice, I believe, and that's what I'm here for, to prove my innocence and to be able to eventually squash the conviction.
The Reverend Williams was defrocked in October last year. The Church of Wales Provincial Court, sitting for the first time in more than 50 years, found the married rector guilty of having an affair with a parishioner, and it said he'd lied to the bishop. But today at the High Court, the former rector from Anglesey, who's been banned from the priesthood for life, is seeking a judicial review of his case. He claims the church court trial was unfair, the standard of proof was too low, and the punishment was too harsh. The former rector has not been able to preach at his church in Anglesey since the allegations of adultery were first made. Having been stripped of his office, Clifford Williams is now living on unemployment benefits and is facing eviction from his church home. His lawyers say if they're not successful here today, they'll consider taking the case to the European Court. Ben McCarthy, ITN, at the High Court in London.
More of the day's news now, and first, day 2 of the Middle East peace talks. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Yasser Arafat will resume negotiations shortly at a conference centre in Maryland. Yesterday, President Clinton urged them to work hard to end the 19-month stalemate.
Air crews are continuing preparations with just 1 day to go before Serbia's President Milosevic runs out of time to withdraw his troops from Kosovo. There are signs that NATO may give him more time to comply by extending the deadline for launching airstrikes by 10 days.
And Pope John Paul II is celebrating his 20th anniversary as the head of the Catholic Church. Thousands have gathered at the Vatican for a special mass to mark the occasion. Many of them travelled from the Pope's homeland of Poland. He's the first non-Italian pontiff in more than 4 centuries.
Action is being taken to curb the large fees charged by some lawyers in criminal cases where the taxpayer foots the bill. It follows a House of Lords inquiry into excessive legal aid bills. New guidelines have been announced to try to close the gap between those bills and what the courts think is appropriate. Shuli Ghosh reports.
The inquiry into legal aid fees was launched after 4 barristers submitted bills for appeals to the House of Lords. One was Michael Mansfield, who charged over £22,000 for a week's research and a day in court. Officials cut it by half.
It's an anachronistic system full of anomalies. The public are right to ask questions. It's extremely rare for a fee to be knocked down by that much, and that's because nobody knew what the House of Lords thought was the proper fee.
The debate over so-called fat cat fees has angered barristers, the vast majority of whom say they don't earn anything like the top QCs.
When we first start out, we already find ourselves carrying considerable debts from paying for fees and general living expenses, couldn't get grants or anything like that. And then thereafter, once you get into practice, it is quite difficult to get a reputation, to get work. And in the meantime, you tend to be living on an overdraft.
But without regulations on fees for cases appearing before the House of Lords, the profession accepts the system is open to abuse. Today, the Law Lords have provided guidance on how the fees can be properly calculated, but they say the ultimate responsibility rests with the Lord Chancellor. The Bar Council have welcomed the Law Lords' report.
People up and down the country want barristers to represent them in court, but that has to be done at a reasonable fee. We want to assure the public that we will work for reasonable fees.
Legal aid costs a country over £300 million a year. The Lord Chancellor is committed to bringing down these costs. Today he said he'd intervene wherever necessary to curb excessive fees. Shuli Ghosh, ITN, Westminster.
The supermarket chain Asda has cancelled all its orders for New Zealand lamb to help Britain's crisis-hit sheep farmers. The move has been warmly welcomed by the farmers who are struggling against a flood of cheap imports. Asda says it wants to lead the way in a campaign to buy British. Neil Connery reports.
For sheep farmer Richard Howells, the last year has been one of the worst in living memory. Lamb prices in Britain have fallen by nearly 40% over the last 2 years.
Come buy, Jess! Come buy, Jess!
Asda's decision to cancel all contracts to buy New Zealand lamb this winter and only sell homegrown lamb could be worth as much as £2.5 million for the British farming industry.
We are extremely grateful that one supermarket has gone down this road, and we would be extremely pleased if other supermarkets would follow suit. I mean, it's obviously going to help, but I'm sure it's not going to be the answer to all our problems.
Asda's decision may benefit farmers, but for shoppers there'll be no change in prices at the checkout. British lamb prices have already been forced down by the high value of the pound, which has led to a glut of cheap imports. It's not yet clear whether other supermarket chains such as Tesco and Sainsbury's will decide to follow suit. Neil Connery, ITN.
Back now to today's main story, the Nobel Peace Prize. It's been awarded to the SDLP leader John Hume and Northern Ireland's First Minister David Trimble for their role in the peace process. A few minutes ago, the Prime Minister Tony Blair gave this reaction.
It's a wonderful, wonderful tribute to the whole of the community in Northern Ireland. And it's often hard for us to understand just how much the eyes of the world have been upon the peace process in Northern Ireland, how much joy and hope right across the world the process in Northern Ireland has brought. And let's use it in a way, not just to mark the progress we have made, but as a spur to get the rest of it done and to get in place a really lasting settlement for the future. But it's wonderful news.
And let's go back now, live now to our Ireland correspondent John Irvine in Belfast. John, any more reaction there?
Yeah, the reaction here has been positive. People have welcomed this announcement. It shows that the world's been watching, the world cares, and the world approves of what's happened here. As for the individuals, I think it bolsters David Trimble's position at a time when he is under pressure from rebels inside his own party. As for Mr. Hume, the leader of the SDLP, I think it simply enhances his reputation as one of Northern Ireland's all-time great peacemakers.
John Irvine in Belfast, thanks a lot.
Before we go, a chance to inspect the new-look Royal Yacht Britannia. She's about to embark on a new era as a tourist attraction. Linda Kennedy went on board the Britannia at her new home in Leith.
The Britannia is almost ready, and today was an early chance to see on board. The first elegant apartment is the drawing room, where the royal family gathered. Noel Coward entertained them on the piano. State banquets were held in the dining room. The Duke of Edinburgh took the original table, but the lavish silverware remains. Such original details will soon be inspected by visitors.
Once you've paid your £6.50 and you're on the Britannia, then you can pretty much wander amongst all the staterooms as you like. Except that is when you ascend this central staircase, which leads from the upper deck to the top deck, for it's here that we find the royal cabins, and for reasons of protocol you can't actually get inside them, but through glass you get some idea of how the Queen lived on board.
The Duke of Edinburgh slept in another cabin, also with a single bed. But this is the room expected to receive most public attention, the honeymoon suite where Prince Charles and Princess Diana began their marriage. And there are reminders of the couple all over the yacht. A former Commodore has overseen the details. He says Britannia has been superbly restored, but there is something missing.
The people themselves are not here. Obviously the royal family are not using it any longer. And of course the Royal Yachtsmen themselves. It was the Royal Yachtsmen who gave the heart to Britannia. They made her the ship that she really became.
Nonetheless, the public are eager to get on board and tickets are selling fast. Linda Kennedy, ITN, in the Port of Leith.
And that's all from us for now, but it'll be back with the early evening news at 5:40.
And we'll both be here on Monday at 12:30. Till then, goodbye. Have a good weekend.
Goodbye.
Hello, good afternoon. A spell of wet and windy weather for us all in the next 24 hours. The weather at its worst across Scotland later today and tonight, and for a time tomorrow. Some severe gales there and even some snow on the hills, so do take extra care on the roads in the north during the next 24 hours. For all of us, it's an unsettled spell. The chart this morning shows a deep area of low pressure to the northwest there. Gale force winds washing around that as well. The weather front's bringing heavy rain for many. And through tonight, as the low moves away to the east, you can see those winds over Scotland turn more to the north, so severe weather on the way, especially for the north. Now already today we've seen the rain building up in the north and west early this morning and sweeping south and east, some very heavy rain around, so even if you haven't got the strong winds yet, the rain is making difficult conditions on the roads. Do take care. So for the rest of the afternoon, in the southeastern corner, only spots of rain. Elsewhere, a lot of rain, some heavy rain in places. Gradually turning more showery in the north and west, but very windy everywhere with gales in places. And then overnight tonight, as the rain comes into the southeast, it will turn more showery in the north, but stay very windy. And there you see those snow showers coming along. Do take care. Here's the summary.
To live and die among the sadistic.
Yes, she's my daughter.
Amid the perverse.
I need you to help me catch the man who did this to you.
Is to live and die with a fear so great.
There's something about the back doors of the van.
The terror so strong.
We are dealing with a monster.
The manipulator.
I was accused of kidnapping a prostitute.
The sacrifice.
And torturing her.
The unjust.
Or kicking her out in the street.
Linda LaPlante.
Madness does that.
Trial and Retribution 2, Sunday and Monday at 9 on ITV.
Next, the main stories in London today, plus lifting news, the Wonderbra celebrity sell-offs.
Come on and save 40% on your new city. 40% off for you and me. 598 BFS 850 extra covers free. BFS 699 BFS 4 years free credit. Baby, that's true. Free for a year. I just had to have...
This great combination offer ends Sunday at DFS.
When I decided to buy a mobile phone, just my luck to come across people who made it seem so complicated.
This phone's cheaper, but the calls are more. This phone's more, but the message service is free.
Aren't there more than 2 networks?
Oh, we only connect to 2.
But then I talked to Angus at the Carphone warehouse. He asked me some simple questions to make sure I got the right phone. He also guaranteed the lowest price. And he wasn't trying to push one network because they're independent.
Sounds wonderful.
Why didn't I just go there in the first place?
New Salon Selected Volumizing Shampoo with Ceramide gives your hair body and movement. So no matter how lifeless you are, your hair needn't be.
All right, now.
Bosch appliances might look stunning, but first and foremost, they're designed to be used. Take a closer look, and you'll find they're also surprisingly affordable and extremely practical, because Bosch designed them to work beautifully in any kitchen. Bosch. Excellence comes as standard.
Thank you very much.
The award show.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Where you choose the winners.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so very much.
The National Television Awards, coming soon on ITV.
A new face at Sun Hill quickly makes friends and adversaries.
What's she like?
Young. Is it her enthusiasm for the job?
Hey, what a rush!
That they don't like? The bill.
We listen. And that way we learn. Try it. Yes, Sarge.
Tuesday at 8 on ITV.
In half an hour, the Jerry Springer Show. First London Today with Angus Scott and Kate Harding.
Hello, good afternoon. Fury unleashed against police over deaths in custody. The families of Londoners who've died while being held by the Mets claim they've been silenced. Today they're protesting as police address the problem at a conference from which many were barred.
We should have been the first choice in that conference today. We shouldn't have to beg and demand to be heard. We will not be forgotten.
In a moment, the families of those who've died speak of how they believe police can cut the number of deaths in custody. Plus, hunting the sadistic animal killers, cat owners in North London are told to keep their pets inside following a string of decapitations. And in the pink, the shocking semi that's proved too colourful for councillors. Families of people who've died in police custody in London have been demonstrating outside a conference aimed at preventing similar tragedies. They're angry because they were initially excluded from the discussions. One of the relatives was only allowed in following protests. And she heard Home Office Minister Alan Michael admit to the Westminster Conference that the number of deaths in custody is on the increase.